want to share with you one of the most painful and poignant rebukes of the Jewish people. Something that Rabbi Avadia Seforno, the great Seforno Italian medieval commentator, says on this week's parsha as we prepare for Tisha B'Av. Something so painful, but worth reflecting on, specifically now as we prepare for the painful days of Tisha B'Av. You see there's an anomaly. Something in this week's parsha makes no sense. This week's parsha, Parshat Devarim, the beginning of the book of Devarim, is always read before Tisha B'Av. Shabbat Chazon, where we read Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos, the Haftarah of the Rebuke of Yeshayahu, is always read on the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av. And therefore, the opening of the book of Devarim, the book of Rebuke, the book not only of Mishneh Torah, which repeats so much of the Torah and reflects and recounts and recalls so much of the Torah, but also of Rebuke, where Moshe Rabbeinu reflects positive and negative back to the Jewish people and the younger generation, not to repeat the sins of the parents and to learn from Jewish history. And what is so striking and unusual is that what is the first thing that Moshe Rabbeinu recounts and retells after his long introduction in the first 8 or 9 verses? He speaks about something I never would have thought, about Yitro, about his father-in-law's suggestion to create a judicial system. If you remember, he was ruling alone in Parshat Yitro. He was the only judge. Yitro, his father-in-law, comes along and says, but Moshe, you're going to wilt away. Navolti Bol. You need to create a judicial system, Supreme Court, district courts, etc. You can't do it all alone. He heeds his advice, and of course, the whole judicial system is created. Brilliant advice to allow Moshe Rabbeinu and the whole judicial system to judge. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu, of all the things, chooses, not Chet HaMeraglim, not Chet HaEgel, not the sins of the past, not Matan Torah. That is what he starts his repetition and rebuke with. That of all things. Incredibly, says the Seforno, the most damning rebuke. It's difficult even for me to say. Says Rabbi Avadia Seforno, you see, look what happened to the Jewish people. How many judges did they need? They went from one judge, Moshe Rabbeinu, to Sarei Alafim. Every 1,000 persons needed a judge. Sarei Me'ot, every 100 people needed a judge. District judges. Sarei Chamishim, every 50 people. Every little neighborhood needed a judge. The Sarei Asarot, every 10 people needed a judge. And here's the horrific words. Ad shekol Yisrael hayat tzarich ledayan prati, almost as if every individual needed their own dayan. Why? Because they fought about everything. Ein ze'ela mitoch ro'a leiv. He said it's from an evil impulse. It's terrible. Meaning, what happened to the Jewish people? Why are you fighting about everything? Of course you need a judicial system. If you don't have a judicial system, you can't have order in society. People, heaven forbid, hurt each other, steal from each other. You have to have the structure and the rule of law and judgment to implement it. But you fight about everything. Do you know the problem with going to court is people rarely manage to resolve anything in court. How many people ever go to court and after they are ruled against them, they say, okay, thankfully now I know that I was wrong. Thank God for the court. And now that I know I was wrong. No, people appeal it. And in fact, Rashi says, part of it says, you know, the words of Eicha we say, there's a pasuk that we sing with Eicha. Eicha, how do we put Eicha esa levadi, tarchachem masachem, rivchem? We sing it in the tune of Eicha from the parsha. How can I put up with all your cumbersomeness? And Rashi says, what's your cumbersomeness? Look at this. It's so difficult to read. He says, every time one of you losing Nadin, the person will go bring another witness and another witness and say, there's no ways I'm going to lose. I'll fight you in courts and appeals of court for years. What are you fighting so long about everything? Can you not resolve things? Of course you have to have courts. But every 10 people needs their own court. The neighbors fight about everything, the noise, the this, the that. Can people not just get on with each other? That is the great challenge we have today of Avat Chinam. And we see it in Israel and around the Jewish world. We fight about so many things. It's also the way we fight and for how long we fight. Can we not resolve things in a different way? Can people not come together and not need to always have confrontations in court and about the court and around the court? Can we not be able to resolve things? And that is our prayer. Sinat Chinam. Yerushalayim is destroyed where people fought about everything. The solution is Avat Chinam. It's the ability to find the humility within oneself to say, you know what, maybe there are two sides to the coin. Maybe we should try and resolve this with a pshara. In Jewish court, we always try and resolve things through compromise and through win-win before we go into the court. Because once we start with court, and once we start going on the weeks, months, and years of fighting, it rarely ends well for both sides. Because you see, life is about relationships. It's about the person, not about the principle. People are always fighting over principles. Sometimes we have to. Somebody stole from us. But other times it's gray. Other times we could have done some things different. We need to see the person. and we need to be able to find a way to live together despite all the differences. That is the great challenge we have today. The avodat ruchanit of the 3 weeks, to see that there might be different sides to the story. Maybe we can get on as people, as ideological groups, that we don't suffer from that sinat chinam. We have the ability to see the other and to put the person before the principle and find a way to live together despite the differences. Shabbat Shalom.